The Chinese Communist Party finally intervenes in the Ukraine crisis to take advantage of the situation for selfish reasons. Facebook decided to allow hateful content as long as it's against Russia, and this is Disrupt. Hello everyone, welcome to the Ukraine Brief, the show that disrupts the mainstream media's narrative and gives us an objective perspective of what's going on around us. So we're still on the Ukraine Brief. We are talking about what's going on essentially around this whole issue because if you obviously listen to the Western media outlets, that you got one side in terms of the pro-NATO side. If you listen to the Eastern side, you get the Eastern propaganda pro-Putin and Kremlin. So it's all, of course, black and white from the mainstream media outlets on either side. But let's talk about China, because I've had this theory way before any of this started that the Chinese Communist Party over the last couple of decades, few decades, as the rise of China started happening, they realized that the days of the actual physical conflicts and invasions are kind of over in terms of internationally. You can't really create empires like that anymore, unless you want to create regional conflicts. If you want to take Taiwan back or Hong Kong, or in the case of Kremlin, Ukraine. But in reality, they realize this is the new battleground, which is the economic battleground, and especially with the rise of the digital world and cyber, they are focusing on that to take over the world in that sense. So they are buying countries out. They've essentially bought out and bailed out Iran. So Iran is owned by China. A number of places in Central Africa, the same problem. And now they are intervening in the Ukraine crisis. The premier of China, Mr. Li, has decided to come out to say, okay, we're going to get involved because the narrative that we're going to send out from Beijing is both sides need to calm down, and we are the grown-ups. You need to trust us to be the police of the world. They want to replace America as the police of the world. Now, whether we agree or not with the history of America leading NATO as the world police has not really gone down well, is it? Every single intervention since the 20th century and now 21st century, America-led, has caused trouble. So let's be honest about that. But do we actually want China to replace the West as the world police either? It's a bit dodgy at this point. But they've come out. They know that Russia are on the losing side in terms of the relations with the West. They're being completely isolated. And as long as Putin stays and the Kremlin is the way it is, then the bridges are all completely burned. So Russia cannot join the international community like before, unless they get rid of Putin. Something happens. And so they know that they can take advantage of this. One is that they can go and buy out Russia. Russia will depend on someone to give them money again. If they're going to go to the IMF or hang out with the United Nations friends and all that, then China are the second most powerful in terms of the actual power, with financial power. So they want to be seen as, well, we want to de-escalate. So let's get involved, and we were the peacekeepers, and Russia will help you out. So they've come out speaking at a news conference at the close of the annual parliamentary session, which is really fascinating. That they have this parliamentary system, which is not really parliament. He said that we support and encourage all efforts that are conducive to a peaceful settlement of the crisis. The pressing task now is to prevent tension from escalating or even getting out of control. Now, Mr. Li is responsible for also the economy of the country. So he's the guy behind the machine of the financial machine of China. Has said that while China calls for exercising utmost restraint and preventing a massive humanitarian crisis, who made you the morality police? Seriously, the history of the CCP is embarrassing how bad and weak the West have become, that China could come back and say, guys, we are the grown-ups now. De-escalate, and we'll buy out Russia. And then this way, the West cannot isolate us because they don't want to be isolated. They want to take over the world in a new way, essentially. This is the new world, right? So they don't want to lose the connections with the West. At the same time, they know that Russia is going, so not in terms of completely losing, but Putin is on the losing side, but he can't really create the connections and relations with the West again. So this is the narrative. And it's fascinating because China have always, and especially with this crisis, have sided with Russia. It's very obvious. They've made all these comments and statements. They are supporting Russia on this, and so far they've even refused to call this conflict any, like invasion or anything like this. So they are not neutral. So whether you criticize the NATO propaganda, and we've done a lot, and what's going on the ground with Ukraine and Zelensky and the United Nations, on the other hand, China are also doing their own propaganda anyway. So there is no good side. There are no angels. No one's hands are clean. And that's what, as I said, the mainstream media in the West don't say this. The mainstream media East, I mean, they have state TV in the East. They don't say that either because everyone's focusing on their own tribes. And the sad part is these guys, Facebook or Meta. Yeah, because that's cool. It's cool to say Meta now. So it's like that meme with the mask, where it's the same, or the Scooby Doo mask. It's the same. These are the same people. Mark Zuckerberg, who's like a terrible rubbish Bond villain, has come out to say, for the first time, we've decided to allow hateful comment on our platform. So we're like, oh, this is exciting. We could do hate now. In reality, extreme violent, like completely physical, insightful comments, they're gonna allow it. So free speech, right? That's interesting. But as long as it's against Russians, what a sad world. This is literally mob rule, because if it was based on principle, like Facebook, Twitter, or any other platform, and they said, well, we're gonna allow actual free speech. But even we, as conservatives and libertarians, we still believe that the line, that the boundary with speech is when you incite violence. So they're banning actual free speech, and then at the same time they're crossing the actual morality boundary and the line, saying you're allowed to incite physical and direct force on their platforms as long as you're attacking the leaders of Kremlin and Russia. So this is a bad door you're opening. This is so dark because, firstly, there will be double standards. Let's just say, hypothetically, tomorrow, Joe Biden decides to become a tyrant in America, starts going around targeting his own people. Do you really think in Silicon Valley, these nerds are going to sit up and say, okay, guys, you can also now do hateful comment against Biden and the White House? Of course not. They're not going to do that. And secondly, how are you going to go back to normal? Where is the line now with free speech? Because we were the ones who were advocating for free speech, and we were called the crazies, the extremes, saying, oh, you guys just want to do hateful comment. We don't want this sort of hateful comment. This is you crossing the line of humanity. And I get it. I get that, there are people from each tribe, so West and East right now, NATO versus Kremlin. One side want to be able to, strengthen their base and say that the supporters of NATO and Ukraine could go and chant, oh, let's just wish death on, I don't know, Putin or whatever. Fine. But then Facebook is not just a Western platform. It's an international platform. It's not a government. It's not a state TV. It's an international platform. It's everywhere. So I'm not really sure why they thought this is a good idea. But this is part of the same campaign to isolate Kremlin. Same reason that the World Economic Forum and Klaus have decided to announce that all relations with Russia have been frozen. Because until now, WEF, this ultra lobbying group, essentially, that infiltrate and try to influence world governments, but not just governments and politicians, but they also do with the corporations and societies in general. They have the young global leaders community as well, so they could be advocates. It's like ambassadors, but without any democracy involved. They actually have and have had many others inside the tent, including President Xi of China, including Putin, including a number of countries that are not allies with each other, but they are basically they created a new version of the United Nations, but for their own, of course, agenda. They want to create this Star Trek world on steroid, to make the whole world centralized and one president of the world. That's the ideal behind it. It's not a conspiracy. It's not some sort of Illuminati. It's basically what they actually want. That they want the whole world to be streamlined and simplified, centralized. But at the same time, they have people who hate each other in the tent. President Xi's there. Then you've got at the same time, the leaders of Germany and France and Italy and UK and America. They are now essentially kicking out Kremlin. So freezing all relations with Russia means you're now completely isolated. This goes back to why China believes that this is a perfect time to take advantage of the situation, to replace Russia as the frenemy and actually try to get close to the West, not to be actual friends, but this is the best way to infiltrate and to own the West, to defeat the West. Because they just want, in terms of the actual Eastern enemy, which is China, the Chinese Communist Party, until now they've been very patient and they're still very patient. They are allowing the West to go down. They're allowing the West to shoot themselves in the foot. We are so busy talking about toilets and the unicorns and rainbows, and we're like fighting with each other, and they're just too busy making money and coming up and becoming stronger and stronger. So they're going to do that. They're going to get closer to the West. It's basically a psychological expansion to the West, and that's what they're doing. But this is part of the whole agenda, that Facebook isolates Russia at the same time as WEF, so isolating Russia, and all the sanctions as well. Of course, we had earlier today that Liz Truss and the Foreign Office have added more sanctions over, I think, around 400 new Russian connections, that they've created more sanctions to them, anyone who's supported Kremlin. So this is going to create a whole new world anyway, and China can see the opportunity. And we are so stupid in the West that we're not seeing what China is doing. We're so busy right now going after Putin because, of course, there's a conflict. I get it. That's the narrative from NATO. That we're not even seeing the bigger threat, the long-term, permanent threat until China wins. They're not going to stop any of this nonsense. But it is what it is. Now, on the other hand, on this show, Disrupt, the second episode, thank you so much for yesterday for all the great feedback that you guys given us. We've gone back to the old format of the old days on YouTube. It's longer videos, but not too long, 10-15 minutes. Give you the detailed analysis of what's going on a particular issue. That's how this channel was created. The everyday Brexit updates, the Brexit brief. And now we're going to do with Ukraine. We're going to, obviously, the next battle, when it changes, we will continue. And my prediction is the next one is the next big one. You know what it is? Oh yeah, net zero. So we're going to have the net zero brief after all this calms down, which is kind of linked, because it goes from this to the energy security debate and then net zero. Ukraine, energy, net zero. But we're going to have different segments. Of course, this is only just the second episode that we've done. Every day at 6 p.m, Disrupt comes to you guys. And throughout the whole day, of course, we're going to have as usual, the shorter updates, a couple of minutes, news updates for you guys around the country and around the world. So thank you so much for all the support, especially if you're new. Subscribe to the channel. And we're going to add more segments to this show as well, because it's 10-15 minutes. I'm going to bring back the news in your world. If you guys remember, we had the segment at a time when you guys were sending us emailing us your stories, anything positive in your life, any shout outs to someone's birthday or whatever, but some achievements, so that we could actually end the show on a positive note. It's a very wishy-washy liberal thing, isn't it? We're becoming hipsters. But if you send it, I'm going to basically announce that the link is in the description. Send an email to lacy@myotc.co.uk. lacy@myotc.co.uk. Send us an email. Anything happy in your life, especially, or anything politically happy that you've discovered. I have an example. We're going to do it now. We're going to finish this show on a happy note. Yes, the UK is staying out of the European Union. The latest poll that we just had, Redfield and Wilton, was very, very credible. The question is, should the UK join the EU or stay out of the European Union? Join the EU, rejoin, is 45%. They've gone down, and staying out, 55%. We've gone up. And leavers, in terms of the actual Brexiters, 87% of them are still saying stay out. And Remainers, 74%, only 74% saying join the European Union. Now, this is quite interesting, because the few opinion polls that we've had, and Ramonas were using it, saying, look, British people have changed their mind. It's how you phrase the question. When it's hypothetical, the questions in the poll saying, If the referendum were today instead of 2016, would you vote to leave? Then yeah, it was 50-50. Sometimes Remain could just be about 51%. But if you're asking now, they phrase it like this: should the UK now rejoin the European Union or stay out? Then leave wins, because leave means leave. So see, that's an example of happy news. But yeah, send us any emails with anything happy, new news in your world, something in your area, something regional or whatever, any shout outs, then we will definitely give it to that, like in the past, basically. Thanks again, guys, for all the support. Thanks for all the kind emails of the last couple of days. We had a lot of good feedbacks. I'm Tousi, and this was Disrupt, because we are the media.